So, Kate, this is a major thing for us, our area meeting. That we have you to guide us into how we might approach a renewal of our spirituality in a way that quite clearly from this book you have done. Start us off. What did you write it? How come?
First, let me say thank you for inviting me here. I don't know that I'm the one to guide anyone spiritually, but I can only share the experiences that I've had. The book.
Finding it difficult to hear at the back.
Is it? Okay, sorry, thank you. If it remains difficult or gets difficult again, please feel free to just do that and we'll hopefully see it. The book came about as a part of my Equipping for Ministry course. I wanted to deepen my Quaker spirituality and enrolled in the course in the 2019 group, which ended up being the last group so far. They're redoing the course, and one of the things that changed for me in the course of that was the group that my Equipping for Ministry group, we still are very close. About half of us are still very close. We began in early 2019 worshiping on Zoom 6 days a week in the mornings. And in the course of those worship sessions, discovered a written ministry that I didn't know I had. And I began to just go to meeting for worship with a notebook, take notes, and then began writing those things and sent some of them off to the friend and to friends quarterly. And then for Kavanaugh, who's a friend, small f, big F friend, suggested that I write a book, one of the great books. And so that's how the book came about. But much of what's in the book came to me as ministry. And if I'm honest, sometimes I look at it and I go, I couldn't have written it. Some of it came from me and some of it came through me.
And what do you hope it might achieve? I mean, clearly it has been meaningful for you. Do you expect it to be meaningful more broadly?
Well, I hope it is. You know, it is a very personal journey, but I hope that parts of it also have a more general appeal. And sort of seeing the room here, I think that may be the case. It has done well in terms of Quaker Quicks books, but it's for me the writing of it was, and if it touches someone else and also maybe resonates with other people, then that would make me very happy.
Our area meeting is concerned with renewing spirituality. Choose your terms. Your terms will be good ones. Do you perceive that elsewhere? Is this a general concern?
I think it is. I think people are seeking a connection. Many people I speak to, or many people I hear from, or many people I see struggling in the world today, which is a world full of struggle. I think many people are seeking a connection, and sometimes it's not clear what that connection is with, what it is we're seeking a connection with. For me, it's a connection with something bigger than me that I call God, the divine, any number of words work for that, a different and new and deeper connection with myself, and through that, a connection with other people. Because it's only in connecting with other people in community that I feel like I'm complete.
You use the God word. Bravely, you use it in the preface to your book. Talk me through some of the implications that God language or a refusal to use God language would have for you. And indeed for the others with whom you connect.
Well, I think it's a very personal thing. I think we all seek a connection with some life force. at its root, it's a life force. For me, it's also about justice and fairness and goodness but I think we all seek a connection with something bigger than us. And some of us find it in nature, some of us find it in churches, some of us find it in different places. And for me, it doesn't matter what you call it. It really doesn't matter. As a friend of mine said, you can call it a cheeseburger as long as you connect with it. It doesn't matter to me what we call it. I use the God word because it's as easy a word. It's a word I grew up with. Many of us did. It's a word I threw out for many years. But when I try, if I need a word, it's as good a word as any. The word isn't the point. The word points to the thing that is. And the word God, again, in the book, it says, if this word doesn't work for you, find one that works for you. It doesn't really matter what we call it. What matters is that we feel it, that we connect to it. And it's whatever we connect to in meeting for worship that brings us back to Quaker meeting for worship time and time again. It's that connection. That is what I use the shorthand term God, but yeah, I use the word, and my EFM tutor was sort of, but it's a very personal thing what we call it. We call it what works for us, and what works for me is God is as good a word as any, and I, rather than spend time finding another one, I just use that one.
Your tutor's reaction is interesting. I won't try and speculate who it might have been. But actually, is that enough? I mean, you clearly know where you are. Other people, other friends are not as comfortable with that. How would you guide them? How would you talk to them? What do you think you would need to do if your tutor had done more than just wave a finger, but had actually said to you, no, we don't use that sort of language here?
Well, again, it's not my role to guide someone. A guide is someone who is an expert, and I'm not. I'm not an expert in your spirituality. And so it's not my role to guide you. My role is this is what worked for me, and maybe it will work for you. If these ideas are useful, then what I would say is that the Quaker way is a difficult one. We all have to find it ourselves. We have to find the words. We have to find the spiritual connections that work for us, and the ones that work for me. The words that work for me may not work for you. If the ideas work, then it's just a matter of semantics, and that's easy enough to fix. If the ideas don't work, then maybe they're a springboard that can help you move to the ideas that do work for you, if that makes any sense.
Makes lots of sense.
For me, the semantics of the word God are not as important as the feeling and the meaning behind it.
That sounds a wonderful way of ending correspondence in the Fed. So that's very good. Thank you. I'm going to take Kate through her book, which I imagine many people have read at least once or several times, as I have. So that's the pattern we're going to follow. And I'm going to be inviting Kate to expand on some things which I have noticed within the book, which she wants to expand on. You're not limited by what I say. To begin with, you're pretty tough on the Christian churches. They didn't serve you. That's clear. And you don't seem to think they serve as many people as they should. Is that fair?
Fair question. I don't know. I see people sort of leaving them in droves. I see mainstream Christian churches closed and sold and turned into bars and hotels. I see, if you know my name, you could probably guess the mainstream Christian church I grew up in. And I see it struggling to keep people in it. So my guess is there are other people who also haven't found what they need there, is maybe the best way to say it. My mother was very devout and found a lot of peace and what she needed in that church. I just never did. I got a very, very good education from them. And sadly, they never thought that I would then turn it to thinking about the other things they taught me. But I kind of had to.
You speak, indeed, many of us speak about the experience of coming home to Quakers. So Rhiannon starts her comment in your book with that. Feels sometimes a bit cozy. The other churches, whom I hold no brief, as everybody will know, but the other churches are definitely challenging. You regard Quakerism as challenging. So is that notion of coming home just a tad too comfortable?
Only if you think that home is a place where you're not going to be challenged. I think home is a place where we are challenged and held in a loving space to rise to that challenge. And I think that that's what sometimes see in Quakers. For me, the sense of coming home, I think I've always been a Quaker. I just didn't know it until my first meeting. And there was, because I did spend many years seeking and looking for a faith, a religion, whatever, a community that had the same idea of a loving spirit, and didn't find it. So I just kind of threw it away and went about my business. And but when I came to my first Quaker meeting, it felt like, well, I'll also tell you, I went to my first Quaker meeting. I was having a struggle with someone at that point, as many of us often do, in my life outside. And someone in the middle of this meeting stood up and read Advices and Queries number 17, which is the one that ends with, "Think it possible you might be mistaken." Don't let the strength of your convictions lead you into making statements that are harsh or untrue. And I thought, how did they know? And I think that was part of it. And part of it also was the welcome that I had. This was at Friargate Meeting House. It was 10 years ago. And many of you may know lovely Barbara Windle was just absolutely friendly enough, but not too friendly. And just absolutely the welcome I needed. And followed up afterwards with, how was that for you? And gave me information I needed, and then let me go and, make my own judgments from there. But that first meeting just absolutely changed many, many things for me.
You found what you describe and insist upon is a simple faith. That's your title. If we look through your chapter 3, it doesn't necessarily look all that simple. There are all these various techniques, systems, things you have to learn to understand, to know the difference between a threshing meeting and a meeting for clearness. Is it really simple, or is the simplicity at a level either above or below that?
Well, again, chapter 3 is 4 pages, not a very long one. But I also think that, again, coming from the religion I came from, where we were told what to think and had to memorize hundreds of questions and answers to respond automatically with to know what we believed, told what we believed. It is very simple. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's not sometimes a little bit challenging, a lot challenging. But when you break it down into it's just my own understanding of Quakerism, and as always with Quakers, let me preface this with, if this doesn't work for you, please just throw it out. But for me, when we try to define what Quakers believe, what Quakerism, unprogrammed Quakerism is about, because it's not, let's face it, the main Quaker faith in the world, but the Quaker faith that I have, if I try to define it without negatives, with negatives we go, we don't have clergy, we don't have this, we don't have steeple houses, we don't have. But what we do have what we do have is we have a belief, first of all, a fundamental belief that every one of us can have a direct relationship with the divine, whatever you call it. And the second one is that every human being, and some people would say every living being, have a bit of that divine in them. For me, that's the core of Quakerism. We don't need an Apostles' Creed that goes on and on about all kinds of other things. We don't need dogma. We don't need a catechism. That's what we have. And from that come the rest of what we do. If we believe that everyone has a bit of God, I use the G word, in them, we don't kill each other, you know, so we become pacifists. We don't hoard our resources, so we live a simple life. We don't treat people differently because they all have that of God in them. So we believe in equality. And there's another one on truth. We don't trick each other, you know, so all of the rest of what we do and the rest of what we believe comes from that, I think. And for me, that's pretty simple. It's not easy, but it's pretty simple.
Simple but profound. Yes, 4 pages can say a lot.
Exactly.
This direct connection with the divine, with God. Talk us through a little bit how you nurture that. What worship you write persuasively in your book about worship and the semantics and linguistics around that. How do you polish your link with the divine?
I think the way that I do that is I plug it in as often as I can. My Equipping for Ministry group, 4 years later, we still meet 6 days a week in the morning. I don't always go as I used to, but I go often enough, and worship at Westminster in London, although we live in Belgium, and so we worship online often. Once a month we try to be in person. But for me, it's that connection that I find in meaningful worship. And there is stuff in the book about the word worship, and I kind of have an itchy feeling about it, but it's in the end, it's that connection, again, whatever word works is the better word. It's that connection to the divine. And when I can center down and feel that connection in the context of other people, and it happens for me best with other people, then that's how I sort of plug into it. You know, it's almost like if you have a good friend that you never see or speak to, you know, how do you nurture that friendship? You sort of connect to them however you can.
I encourage you just to scratch that itch about worship a little bit more. It, as a term, it is so central. The George Gorman line, which many people have used afterwards, the amazing fact of Quaker worship. It is worship. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. For me, the word worship comes from Old English, which means to give worth to someone. And I'm not sure that God needs us to sort of give worth to God. I'm not sure that God needs for us to say how great thou art. I'm not sure that God needs to sort of, it all sounds sort of sycophantic to me, if I'm honest. But I think in Quaker worship, which I do use the word, there's something else going on. And it's not us giving worship to God, telling God that God is worthy, and you know, God doesn't need that from us, you know, but we need that from God. We need that from each other. And that's why I do use the word. But it's going the other direction. And for me, at the basis of my spiritual awakening is this idea that God gives me worth, that God loves me just as I am, broken, imperfect, all of that God loves me as I am. And I think that was the central message from Jesus, is God loves you just as you are. And having that sense of sort of unconditional love means that I don't have to change. but I want to. I want to then be the best person I can. And so it's that connection that I find that brings worth to me and to other people. And in Quaker worship, I'm not sort of giving worth to God, it's the other way. And I think it brings worth to me, but also to everyone with whom I worship. I have a friend who's Belgian and native French speaker, and she calls it a meeting for worship. I just love it. I've never ever changed that. I love that.
And worship is affected by prayer. Does prayer plug into exactly that same approach?
I think it does. You know, C.S. Lewis said, prayer doesn't change God, prayer changes me. And that is my experience. I will tell you when I was first married, many years ago, I had a job where I traveled all over the US and Canada. I would leave home on Sunday night and get home on Friday night if I was lucky, and was often in a different city every day. It was exhausting. It was also, well, it taught me a lot. My husband had a job. We lived in Washington, D.C. My husband had a job where twice a month he would go to Montreal because he had an office there as well. And I was so afraid that one of his planes would crash and that he would die. My cats would hate me. I'd be a bag lady. I never worried about my own planes, but I worried about his. And I said that to him. And he said to me something that I just rolled my eyes so bad I could almost see my brain. He said, well, just pray that it doesn't happen. This was way before I found Quakers. I just rolled my eyes and said, oh, yeah, right. But I started every day when we're together, and I still do this. I put my hand on him and say, I love this man, please keep him safe. For 34 years, prayer, I'm not sure that prayer has kept his planes in the air. And what that prayer has done is it's taken that fear away from me, taken that fear that I'm going to lose the most important person in my life and given it away just for that day. Comes back the next day, I have to give it away. And so for me, prayer, that's one of many, there's several kinds of prayer, and we talk a little bit about that in the book, but there's also just a prayer of connecting to God and saying, you know, hi, how are you? You know, what's going on? And, you know, kind of hang out kind of prayer. But I use that in my business life. I spent 10 years as a corporate human resource consultant and travel all over the US and Canada. And whenever I would go into a difficult meeting, I would pause on the threshold and just say, help me with this. And that would stop the spinning in my head about what they might say, what I might have to do. I just kind of put it all down outside the meeting room and let me go in centered. Prayer is really an important part of my life.
And a way of intercession, the way you describe it, you are connecting with God in order to connect back to yourself. Do you see any wider opportunities for prayer? Not least in this imperfect world.
Yeah. So I have seasonal allergies and they're kicking up today. I do. I think prayer, I do think there's a power that, and I don't have a lot thought behind this. So let me just kind of wing it.
Wing it, you're winging very well.
I do think that when a group of people get together and pray, there's a power in that when they pray for the same thing, not necessarily using all the same words, especially if they're in a dead language, but praying for the same, with the same intent. I think there's a power in that can change the world, or at least change certain circumstances. And if nothing else, it changes us. It takes away from us for a short time the fear that can damage us in many ways, which I think you're getting ready to talk about.
Why don't we talk about that?
Let's do it.
Beautiful.
Okay. One of the things I believe in, that in order to be spiritually whole, we have to connect with God, something bigger than us, with ourselves and with other people. And when we connect with ourselves, we do that in order to find a new relationship with ourselves, having connected with God and understanding that God loves us just as we are. And maybe for me, began to look at who am I and how am I, and try to understand myself in a different way. And that entailed sort of looking really hard at my strengths and my weaknesses. And, you know, for example, I will tell you, I can be, on the one hand, I can be conscientious, I can be persistent, I can be organized. On the other hand, I can be stubborn, I can be controlling, I can be a workaholic. And down the line, I mean, there's a whole lot of things like that. I can be creative, I can be a liar. I think for me, understanding those, that this is a complex box of who I am, but understanding that all of those are two sides of the same coin, that persistence and stubbornness are very similar. Confidence and arrogance are very similar. And so I began to then say, okay, if I sort of think about sort of my weaknesses, I used to think of them as sort of black spots on my soul, but they're not. In fact, they're patterns of behavior that at one point in my life helped me survive, and now they don't. Now they interfere with relationships, with God, with myself, and with other people. And I need to, I am better at those relationships without these patterns of behavior. And so I needed to understand what turns persistence into stubbornness, what turns confidence into arrogance. And when I sort of sat back and thought about it and felt about it, what it seems to me is fear. It's fear. If I'm feeling confident and you throw a big dose of fear at me, then it can sort of harden into arrogance, you know. Or if I'm feeling organized and you throw a big dose of fear at me, it can be controlling. My flexibility is gone. And specifically, a couple kinds of fear. The fear that I'm going to lose something I have, like my husband, or not get something that I want. And those specific fears are the ones that I work really hard to calm and to not let change who I am. So
That's within you. You write persuasively in your book about the value of differences in respect of other people. You're interested, it's still in that section of connecting to God. That variation, those differences, I don't want to use the word abnormal, which you very carefully don't use, but not normal. Is that part of the same thing?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's understanding sort of the almost in a, well, I won't say that, but understanding that the variation in people is really important. It's our strength as a community. And one of the stories in there is about a professor I had in undergraduate school, who she taught a course called mental hygiene, which eye roll. It just didn't sound very appealing. But in the end, it was one of my favorite undergraduate courses, and it was normal psychology. And what she said was, you know, normal isn't healthy. Normal is just average. It's what everybody does. And it's not necessarily the best thing to do. It's what everybody does. And she said, the world has never been changed by normal people. The world has never been changed by people who were average. And you know, we're all above average in some way or another. We're all different from that norm in one way or another. And she was Austrian, she was Viennese, and sort of Freud, classically trained Freudian psychotherapist. And she said in her lovely Viennese accent, do you realize, she was also Jewish, if I could have got my hands on Jesus Christ, he would have been the best carpenter in the world. And I thought, you know, it's that kind of understanding that in the ways he was different than the people around him and different than maybe many people around him wanted him to be. Those are the ways in which he changed the way our lives go today. Those are the reasons we still talk about him.
I can't resist recalling Garrison Keillor,
Yeah.
and his description of Lake Wobegon,
Yeah.
where all the children are above average. Yes, in their own way. This is really what you're saying to them.
Exactly. That echoed in my head too as I said that.
So what about the importance of imperfection?
Ah, I love that. You know, we try so hard to be perfect. And, you know, especially growing up, I anyway, I tried to be just a perfect little girl. And never came close. And we try to be perfect for many, many reasons, partly because we think the people around us will love us if we're perfect. We think that especially God will love us more if we're perfect. But in fact, trying to be perfect doesn't bring us closer to God. It's where we're trying to be God. You know, the root of the word perfect, the origins of that word, if you go back etymologically, the word perfect comes from Latin, perfecere, which does not mean without flaws. It means complete. And we still see echoes of that in grammar where we have the past perfect tense and blah, blah. But the word perfect originally didn't mean flawless. It meant complete. And you can be flawed and complete. And that for me was really important. And I think that when we try to be perfect, we're setting ourselves a goal that we cannot attain. And it either means that we constantly fail and we have to deal with that, or we just give up because it's too hard. I'm not going to even try, you know. But when we realize that we're not supposed to be perfect, that it's not our calling to be perfect, it's our calling to be the best version of ourselves we can be, then we can let go of perfection. And then we can also let go of expecting other people to be perfect. And that for me is where community begins, is understanding that we're all doing the best we can. We're not going to be perfect, so we might as well give that one up. There's one more thing I want. You know the story about the rug weavers who always put a flaw in the rug because only God is perfect and therefore they don't want to offend God? So many problems with that story. First of all, if it's true that only God is perfect, I don't have to try to put a flaw in the rug, the flaw will be there. You know? But secondly, is God that petty? You know, is God really that petty that you know, oh, there's a perfect rug, keep going. But more importantly for me at a deeper level is if God gives us a perfect day, a day when we can be perfect, or one thing we can do perfectly, why would you not want that? Why would you sort of throw that back and say, oh no, thanks, I don't want to offend you by accepting the gift you've given me? I think perfection and the idea of perfection has just gotten us in so much trouble. I just throw it away. It's not I'm not called to be perfect. We are all imperfect, but I think we're perfectly suited to the work we are called to do, which is where understanding how our strengths and weaknesses can be related, that they're two sides of the same thing, and that sometimes it is maybe the harder side of my character that is needed in a certain situation. I think of one member of my former meeting who always was so persistent in when she wanted something that she would not take no for an answer. It was so annoying. So, oh, for goodness sake, just stop. But the work she accomplished through that and many other pieces of her character is astonishing, the work that she does. And I think, you know, so I think when we can let go of being perfect, we can in fact then begin to connect to other people and begin to live in community with each other.
I might jump to the defense of the rug makers. Blessed are the rug makers. Is there something in what they do or what it is said that they do, which almost a symbol of their belief, of their faith? Are they finding a way of connecting with God by embracing their own imperfection?
Perhaps. And certainly having done needlework in the past, there is almost a hypnotic, worshipful piece to it when you do it. And I can imagine a rug maker making the rug as an act of worship, especially if it's a prayer rug. But that's not the way the story is told to us in the West. So yeah, that's all I was.
Yeah, That's fair. In between spaces
Mhm.
is something which, or a concept which is clearly important to you. Would you like to expand on it?
I haven't thought about that one for a while.
3-page reference if it'll help. 36.
Yeah, I remember it's, when I sat her down, for worship, I try to find that place where in breath, where you're not breathing in and you're not breathing out, the sort of pause. You know, you throw a ball up in the air, that instant when it's paused perfectly still in the air. And I try to find that and live in that as a way of centering down. And when I do that, then it makes me think of other places that are in between. And I haven't thought about it. And I think the biggest thing I think about is COVID. Felt like that to me. It felt like a place in between then and a place in between then and now, between the way the world was and the way the world is. It felt like a stop in the world. And I remember as I was sort of living in that and thinking about it a lot, I spent lockdown in Quaker House, Brussels, where Dan and I lived at the time, with our good friend Andrew Lane and a number of Sudanese refugees. And they were in between Europe and UK. They were trying to come here where they had community, and they were trying to find a place to make their lives. And there was just so much in between stuff happening there, and trying to think how to position ourselves and how to position the house and things for the world that was coming, and which we didn't know about. So for me, it's probably not as important as it was at that time. Yeah.
You write, page 42, if it will help, for all the peace building skills that Quakers try to cultivate, every Quaker community has trouble from time to time living with these principles, from which I deduce this is an experience you have had possibly more than once. How do we deal with being judgmental, with judging others, and as you firmly say, judging oneself?
Yeah. My experience with this is some of it's personal, but also some of it is when I hear other meetings having conflict, and you know, we even have a repairing meetings group in BYM, which tells me it's a pretty big thing happening, and I think COVID made it worse. But for me, the thing about judging is when we judge other people, we put a barrier between us and them. You know, when I let me speak for myself. When I judge someone, I put a barrier between us and them, between me and them. And whenever we divide into us and them, it's always them who loses out. But when I judge somebody and put that barrier there, I forget that God's on the other side of that barrier in them. And if I'm not careful, then I lose that connection that is so important to me, that connection to God through them and through the people I'm judging. And the other thing about judging is that I forget sometimes, or I have to learn more than once, that the voice I hear in my head judging other people is the same voice I hear in my head judging me and telling me I'm not enough, when I'm thinking they're not enough and they're doing it, blah, blah. That same voice is saying that about me. And that's the way that I need to let that voice go, because I need to remember that God loves me just as I am. And if I need to change that, then it's up to me. But I think that judging other people is sort of the beginning of fissures in our community and breaks in our community that can break it apart.
And the solution is forgiveness?
Yeah. But the, part of the solution is forgiveness. Part of it. Part of the solution is forgiveness, which for me means giving up being a victim, you know, sort of letting go of what they did to me. And just understanding that we are all trying to do our best. We're all imperfect. We're all, it's coming back to that the thing of we're all imperfect. I had a mentor once who told me, you know, Kate, almost nobody, well, she said nobody, wakes up in the mirror, looks in the mirror and thinks, I'm gonna be really unpleasant today. I think she used another word. And so to understand, you know, she used to say to me when I would complain about what was going on in my work life, she would say, now tell me the story from their point of view. And I wasn't allowed to say, oh, I'm gonna be unpleasant today. You know, I had to sort of make it make sense. And when I did that, when I could sort of take down that barrier between me and whoever it was du jour, and put myself in their position and look back at myself, then I could see things differently. And that's, for me, it's forgiveness, but it's also that willingness to sort of go on the other side of that barrier that I've created and say what's going on from that side. What am I doing to contribute to this? And then also maybe understanding that we're all doing our best and we're all imperfect and we're all flawed. And we need to understand that about each other.
And the concept of inclusivity, which is clearly very important to you. People from different faiths, different backgrounds can all contribute to this same desired whole. Are you optimistic about it?
Depends on where if we're talking about a meeting, yeah. If we're talking about the world, it's a little more difficult. So certainly in a community, yeah, it's absolutely. But in the political world, I don't know. I should just also say, I don't work well at the policy levels. Yeah, much more a local operator.
Which brings us, the time is right that it should bring us, to letting one's life speak. Talk to us about that. You write about many things, but talk to us about the things that matter to you and still matter to you in that respect.
I think one of the things I love about Quakerism that we know here is that it's not enough. We're not contemplative. We're not chosen to be or chosen. We don't choose to be or not chosen to be contemplative. Most of us. Let me back that up because this is my EFM cadre who is. But most of us are not contemplative. Most of us come back to the broken world and what we try to bring, what I believe we try to bring back from meeting for worship, from this sense of unity with all things, is to bring that back to the broken world and the word of Marshall has to bring that to the God-forsaken. And I think that's a really important part of Quakerism, is my Quakerism, certainly my own faith, is to try to make the world better. It's my own corner of it. I'm not going to change the world, but my corner of the world I can change. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia during the civil rights movement and was greatly influenced. Sorry, this is emotional for me. Was greatly influenced by Dr. King, and he always said, you know, you start where you are, you use what you have, and you do what you can. And for me, that's what Quakerism brings to my life, is the energy, the engine that can help me do what I can to make the world a little bit better around me.
I'm here. Is the phrase you use. I'm here. Here I am.
Yeah.
Is that enough?
Depends on who's saying it.
Well,
yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, for me, listening is an important part of what Quakers do. we listen to people, and it's an important part of the peacemaking, especially that Quakers do. It's an important part of nonviolent communication. It's an important part of many of the ways in which we let our lives speak in the world. But I think it begins with listening for God, listening to God, listening for in worship, meaningful worship. It begins there. And sometimes that's where I'm here. And yeah.
Moses' response to God, "Hineni, here I am."
Yeah, exactly.
That's been great. Is there anything that you would have wanted us to talk about now before we open it up to questions? Have I missed anything?
No, I think you've been very thorough.
Well,